I want to talk about how we fight back against the digital censors, fight back to protect free speech. But I also want to emphasize that free speech is not limited to the First Amendment. Now, I was thinking about this issue as I was on the plane making my way to the Frank Speech rally in Wisconsin. And I came across Trump's statement that sort of made me laugh out loud, but also made me think. I wanted to read the statement and go into it a little bit. He starts off very Trumpian. Congratulations to the country of Nigeria who just banned Twitter because they banned their president. More countries should ban Twitter and Facebook for not allowing free and open speech. Now, at the first glance, it seems like an irony. Trump is calling for censorship. He's calling for banning Facebook and Twitter. But his reason is he says it himself, quote, all voices should be heard. He wants to ban these outlets because they are banning people in the country. So he wants to fight back against censorship by, in a sense, censoring the censors. He goes on, in the meantime, competitors will emerge and take hold. Now, this is an important idea, that while you're fighting against censorship, you want to create platforms that enable free speech. That's happening in America, happening maybe a little more slowly than we would like, but it is happening nevertheless. And then says Trump, who are they to dictate good and evil if they themselves are evil? Now, this is, I think, a quite profound statement. Trump is saying, these guys set themselves up as the arbiters of what's right and what's true. And Trump is saying, but are they? First of all, they don't know what's true. They're not sure where COVID came from. They have absolutely no idea. They're simply choosing their authorities and pretending that because they choose to believe A, B, and C, that then what D, E, and F are saying is false. But they're trying to camouflage the fact that they are making ideological choices. They're choosing whom to believe in a debate that they are unable to penetrate the truth for themselves. And then Trump says very tantalizingly, perhaps I should have done it while I was president. And I think here Trump is realizing that he did have a window in which he could have done something about digital censorship. By the way, so could the entire Republican Party. The Republicans had the House, they had the Senate, albeit narrowly, and they had the presidency. They could have repealed the Section 230 protection had they made it a priority. Guys like Lindsey Graham now are like, I'm on it, I'm on it. No, he's not on it. And now is the time when he can't do anything about it. And then Trump says, interestingly, but Zuckerberg kept calling me and coming to the White House for dinner, telling me how great I was. And I don't know if Trump is implying that Zuckerberg, in a sense, misled Trump, or he was able to dissuade Trump from taking the kind of action he should have done. Let's turn to what Trump is referring to with Nigeria. The Nigerian president, Muhammad Buhari, put out a tweet. He was basically talking about a secession movement in Nigeria. And the secession movement, remember, in Nigeria, these are countries that have had terrible tribal conflicts. Buhari himself is an elected leader, and he was warning the secessionists, kind of in the manner that Lincoln might have warned the Confederates, hey, listen, if you take this to the next level and you get violent, you're going to have to pay a heavy price. Twitter decides, he's violated our policies, we're going to give him a temporary ban. And Nigeria decided, hey, listen, this is going to be a little too much. You're banning the elected president, and yet you want the right to function in our country. Interestingly, the information minister, in announcing that they were shutting Twitter down in Nigeria, the information minister compared Twitter's actions in Nigeria to those that Twitter took after the riot at the U.S. Capitol in January 6th, including the banning of the account of Trump. So Nigeria sees, in a sense, that this free speech threat is not just in Nigeria. It's actually occurring all over the world. And by the way, other countries are seeing it too. Here's India, by the way, warning Twitter that if Twitter doesn't comply with Indian laws, then Twitter is going to face some serious consequences in India. I'm now quoting the India information minister. He says, as a gesture of goodwill, Twitter is given one last notice to immediately comply with the rules. Now, the funny thing about Twitter is that whenever they get this kind of stuff, these kinds of restrictions in other countries, they start screaming free speech. Here's Twitter. We are deeply concerned by the blocking of Twitter in Nigeria. And here's the killer line. I mean, reeking with hypocrisy. Access to the free and open internet is an essential human right in modern society. Really? Are we getting this from you, Jack Dorsey? You fraud. You don't believe that it is a human right. If it's a human right, you would be recognizing that right in the United States. You wouldn't be banning people left and right who don't agree with your views. You wouldn't be posting notices and corrections and intervening in other people's arguments to say, we see it differently. All of this nonsense that you and the other digital moguls are doing, all of this is inconsistent with this claim that the free and open internet is an essential human right. I confess that when I see people going against Twitter, including banning them, shutting them down, I feel a surge of delight. I start laughing. A smile comes to my face. I get the same smile that I would get when, let's say, David makes a nice rounded stone and uses the slingshot to bring down Goliath. Why? Because these digital behemoths are Goliath. They're functioning like Goliath as a tyrannical force in a free society. So anything that tames them, anything that brings them down, anything that puts pressure on them to open up and have the internet that they promised us, that is going to be good. Now, let's talk about free speech at the most fundamental level, because very often when we think about free speech, we only think about the First Amendment, as if to say that free speech is only protected against government regulation. Now, in the case of the digital moguls, you have government figures, elected figures, Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, Senator Chris Coons, talking about, he says, yeah, the internet, he's telling these digital moguls, you've got to silence the climate deniers. So government figures, far from pressing for free speech, are pressing for more censorship. Now, our public sphere isn't limited to the government. Our public sphere is the whole space in which people have conversations and arguments that are critical to a democratic society. When Lincoln used the term public opinion, he wasn't just talking about like the opinions of the public, the kind that you'd measure in a poll. He was talking about people who participate in the arguments of democracy, who are, in a sense, hands-on in trying to figure out what's going on, what makes sense, what is true, what is the right way to think, what's good, what's evil. This is an argument that is going on inside of democracy, and it's occurring not in the government, it's occurring outside the government, but in the public square, and it's about public policy, so it has a direct bearing on the government. The point is that while Twitter and Facebook say, well, we're private companies, we have the right to free speech. Well, if that's the case, then why do other private actors in our society not have that right? Think about the guy, for example, who had the Masterpiece Cake Shop in Colorado. He has the right to speak. And by the way, the right to speak, the right to free speech, includes the right not to say something or not to be forced to say something. But in the case of the Masterpiece Cake Shop guy, they were trying to force him to bake a cake, a wedding cake, for a gay marriage, or to make a cake that promoted transgender rights. These are not things he believes in. And yet, in this case, the local authorities were trying to compel him to speak in a manner that he didn't want to speak. So free speech here, as I say, can be threatened in the private sphere. It can be threatened in all kinds of ways by private actors, but it's threatened most of all by these digital platforms. Why? Because that is our new public sphere. That is the way in which we communicate with each other in public space. And if we don't have those forums, what do we have? How do we communicate? So these guys realize, and it's only a handful of guys, about 6 of them, that they're strategically placed to regulate, throttle, and control the information that passes into the public sphere. So they are a much greater threat than the government. They're a greater threat than the government because they are strategically positioned to be able to control speech where it matters. It's not just that they are assaulting democracy by doing this. They're also assaulting our basic humanity. Why? because the ability to speak is the essence of what it means to be human. We're a particular type of animal that communicates. And not only do we need to communicate with each other, we're social animals, as Aristotle says, but our speech is also part of the way in which we define ourselves. It's critical to our identity. So we hear all the time about identity and identity politics. How about the fundamental value of speaking to be able to define how you think, what you believe, and how you feel? And so in this sense, the attack on free speech by the digital moguls isn't just an attack on democracy, it's an attack on our very humanity. It is the new form of barbarism for our time.